So it's the same. You get the same outcome, but it's more perverse. People don't notice inflation as much as they do direct taxes. Everything in this world revolves around power, and that just really opened my eyes. And the first video in that direction was I read a book called what was it called? The Creature from Jekyll Island, about how the Federal Reserve was founded by a secret meeting with all the elite bankers at the time.
Tell that story for people that don't know it.
Yeah, so Jekyll Island is a real island. I believe it's somewhere in Georgia, maybe. And at the time, they wanted to create a central bank in America because America didn't have a central bank at the time. It was based off of the gold standard.
What years are we talking, roughly?
Early 1900s, I believe. Okay. I could be wrong. But they knew the American people would never fall for a central bank because I believe at the time, people were aware of the dangers of central banking.
Really?
And a fiat currency, yeah.
What, like the average American?
Or I'm not totally sure about the average American, but definitely the general consensus.
Maybe within people that actually were in the government and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
What made them so afraid of it?
You're kind of testing my memory right now, but it's been a few years.
That's what I do.
But because America had tried, I believe, to have a central bank in the past, in the 1800s, and I believe it failed miserably or something like that. So people knew the dangers of it. So the elite bankers at the time, I can't remember who exactly they were. Maybe one of them was J.P. Morgan. They all took a secret train ride to this Jekyll Island place, and there they formulated the plan to get America onto central banking. And they purposely called it the Federal Reserve to make it sound like a piece of the federal government, a part of the federal government, when in reality, the Federal Reserve is privately owned, and it will allow them to print as much money as they want.
Wait, it's privately owned?
Yeah.
How does that work?
These days, it's privately owned by the big banks. And the leaders of it, I believe they're still government bureaucrats. But that's how part of the argument is, you separate the government from the money printer, but I don't think that's how it works in practice.
Yeah, it doesn't really work that way. There's so much, and now in the media age, there's so much political pressure that's put on it. I mean, you've seen how much money they've printed, for example, over the past 5 years, and it all started with the pandemic, where you had the whole government freak out and say, "We're gonna crash if you don't print it," and it's who's really making the decisions here,
Yeah, definitely.
But that's crazy though, that our society then just accepts something like that as the standard norm. Oh yeah, the Federal Reserve, that's how we get our money. And it's just a bunch of old dudes in the forest talking to each other.
Yeah, and if you look at the graph of the value of the dollar, from the moment the Federal Reserve became a thing to today, we've lost I've seen numbers between 90 to 99% of the value of the dollar.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the inevitable outcome when you're allowed to print money.
Yeah, I Anthony Pompliano?
Yeah.
On the internet. So he's been talking about inflation for so many years with these charts, and you look at them and they look fake. You're like, this can't be real. But then you start to consider it, and you think about even we weren't alive back then, but you think about what people could buy with $1 when you hear the stories in say 1950. What they can buy with it, you can't buy anything with $1 now. It's just math, and we've effectively done that to society. But I mean, there's also so many other companies. You talk about the private banks, so to speak, owning the Federal Reserves. You now have these behemoths like the BlackRocks, like the Vanguards, and these huge companies that also own the literal stock of all the publicly traded companies that then basically have to report to them, so they keep buying them, and people wonder why society is so corrupt.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when it comes to the money printing, it's the most covert way of taxing you, because if you're the government and you want tax dollars from your subjects, your people, you really have two ways. You can tax them directly, but then people are going to get angry if you have to pay a really high tax on your income or whatever, or you can inflate them by printing more money. Because when you print more money, the value of everyone's dollars in their bank account goes down. So effectively, you get the same outcome as taxing people directly.
How? Wait, you lost me for a second. How do you get that if you are still based off the dollar that's also losing value in that process anyway?
Because as the government, you print the money to spend, which is kind of the same outcome as you taxing them and them having to pay money directly from their bank account.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the same. You get the same outcome, but it's more perverse. People don't notice inflation as much as they do direct taxes.
Yeah. And you look at society, like we notice the tragedy. You know, we notice the helicopter that flies into the plane and, you know, some people die. It's a horrible thing. But if you look at that, I think there were that one that just happened. There were like 64 people on that plane or something. We're still waiting to hear how many passed away. But at the same time, you have epidemics like cancer and heart disease that we talk about and we accept. And we're like, oh, well, it's horrible. But yeah, a lot of people die of that. And they're killing millions of people every single year. But because it's just a statistic, you know, and then you have your anecdotal stories, of course, you know, where people lose family and stuff like that. Like, it's not this main news story where it's like, oh my God, something just blew the.
Yeah.
And so we almost that, I don't know what the term is for this. It's on the tip of my tongue, but like that tragedy of just the slow burn versus the instant hit makes us ignore things like this. And it ignores even things economically for us, as you're pointing out.
Yeah, same thing with like I believe the stat is 100,000 people died in 2023.
Oh.
And I believe that's a very high multiple of like one single.
Oh yeah, exactly.
In a single year too.
In a single year.
But because it's not like what you said, people just don't really notice it.
What do you think that is? The crisis. Obviously, we know the cartels are like bringing across the border and stuff, and there's been some open border problems. But what does that emanate from? Do you think this is like a reverse opium war?
Yes, because I had Louis Chaparro.
Oh,
I'm definitely not saying his
Yeah.
last name right,
Louis
but
Chaparro.
yeah, I had him on for a video, and he showed me WhatsApp messages where you can literally buy the ingredients to make from these Chinese vendors. And you see their WhatsApp messages with like their Chinese name and stuff. And yeah, he believes that it's definitely part of, you know, China's subtle warfare with us, where, you know, they were humiliated by the West from the opium wars. And now this is kind of like their way of getting back to us. And, you know, if you're China and your military isn't strong enough to face the U.S. head on, like, why wouldn't you do stuff like this?
Yeah. It's crazy. I've told this story before, but there was a guy named Ben Westhoff who wrote a book called Inc. You ever hear of this?
No.
So I think we're going to get him in for a podcast at some point here, but he had done a podcast with Joe Rogan maybe 5-6 years ago where he talked about how he got into it. And he was like, I was a culture reporter. I wrote about like the music industry and he was given some sort of story where he had to cover something within, I think, the music industry. And somewhere along the way, he was talking with a guy and an offhand comment came up about. And he was like, oh, tell me about that. He didn't really know anything about it. And long story short, he suddenly went down the rabbit hole and realized, oh my God, there's a story in here. Ends up writing this whole book. But one of the things he did was he like alone went undercover to China just to see how easy it would be to get like a hookup. He like went into the factory, talked to the guy. He's like, yeah, so I could just get, they're like, yeah, well, FedEx it to you or whatever. And he's like, I can do this. Think about like what organized crime groups can do to get this in. Like there's no way that, like, you know, we can talk about China doing the reverse opium war. I believe that. And Luis's research is great. But also, why the are we letting it in so easily? I feel like there's better ways we could stop it or more things we could do to stop it here, no?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, one other thing Luis told me is that, you know, the cartels in Mexico, they would have Chinese reps come over and show them how to make the drug with these ingredients. And on top of that, now there's a stronger drug that's something like 50 times stronger than
50 times?
Yeah, it's called nitazines.
Huh.
Also coming from China, same kind of setup. It's like the next big money maker. And the reason why the cartels love fentanyl is not because they're like intentionally trying to kill their customers. It's because they can cut it into other drugs and just make the other drugs way cheaper. So it's definitely a money incentive.
Who do you think runs the world? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that later.
I think that, you know, these days, everything has to be very PR friendly. Like with our politicians and those in power and whatever. But at the end of the day, we still have the same human psychology from the Dark Ages, from all these other way worse periods of time. So I think the same things that were happening before are still happening today, just behind the scenes. You have to make it more PR friendly. So,
What does that look like, though?
so I think, before it was a few families running things around the world, like a few powerful families. I think it's probably something similar to that today, except they just have to go like jump through more hoops, like bribe the politicians and stuff like that, instead of doing it overtly.
Who were, like, when you say there used to be a few families running the world, when and who are you talking about?
Well, if you look at like the Forbes list of like the world's richest people, what you notice is that most of those people made their money in the last few decades, usually from tech or some other stuff like luxury or whatever. When in reality, we have 8 billion people on the planet. And, before these people made their wealth, there were a lot of other people, a lot of other families that were just as wealthy and are probably way more wealthy than the people on the Forbes list. So I think it's families like that. Whereas maybe it's not a single individual like Mark Zuckerberg owning all that wealth.
Yes.
It's usually like, a powerful family dynasty.
And you're saying that they're not on the Forbes list, I guess, because they're better at hiding their money or spreading it around the actual full family?
Because if you look at the Forbes list, most of those people have public money that's tied to like public stock, which is extremely easy to trace. You can just view it like the market cap on the stock market, like Zuckerberg or whatever. Whereas most of these other families, they own private property, they own other forms of wealth that aren't tied to like public tech companies that are extremely hard to trace. And if you look at like a Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, they kind of have to show off their wealth because that's part of their like personal brand. That they're like, these super smart tech people or whatever. Whereas most of human history, if you have wealth, you definitely hide it, or else, the peasants will raid you or pillage you.
And it's funny because it feels like that circle of life is coming back around because we have such a wealth gap that's happened. You actually just did a video recently on like the death of middle class that was really good, but like this wealth gap has now exacerbated the divide between the common man and the ever shrinking almost group of like actual powerful man. And yet we have the most see-through to each other that we've ever had because of the internet and obviously mass access to media. Yet there's more of an ability for some of those people to flaunt the wealth they have or feel like they can do that today when you would think it would be the opposite.
Yeah, I think, half of it is like, the new rich people that, want to show off their wealth.
Yeah.
The other half is like the old money people that intentionally try to hide their wealth.
Yeah, the old money thing. You start looking like family offices and how they slush that stuff all around to keep it going through the generations. I don't understand that mentality. Like, because in a lot of ways, it's always like you're ruining the next generations because what do they even work for? They're just inheriting what they had. Like, I don't want my kids, when I have a lot of money, to like know that I have a lot of money or inherit that. I want them to go be dogs and form their own life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I made a video on the horrible lives of rich kids because...
Oh, shit. Can we pull this up, Alessi?
Because... all of us look at rich kids and we envy them. Like, I wish my parents were rich. When in reality, you really don't. Because if you look at these rich families, they have impossible expectations for their kids. Because if you're like a third generation rich kid and you're like the patriarch made all the money, like your grandpa or something, by the time you were born, all that money's compounded into maybe like billions of dollars.
Yep.
And there's literally no way. There's an extremely, extremely slim chance that you could ever surpass that on your own unless you join the family business.
Correct.
So, for, people like me that grew up in a poor family, like any amount of success that I achieve, whether it's like, a 100K job or $1 million a year, my parents are going to be ecstatic. It's very easy to make them proud. And at the end of the day, all of us at some level want to make our parents proud. That's like part of our, purpose or whatever you want to call it. But for a rich kid, it's literally impossible to make your parents proud.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of them end up turning to like drugs and stuff, like we talked about in this video.
Yeah. Can we turn the volume on, unless you go back to the beginning?
I know that guy.
Let's see what this is. Your edits are amazing. I love it.
Some the money, some the drugs. How does this game, the glamour, or the fame?
A kid who has everything. Parties. Super young. I'm going to inherit more money than most people could earn or spend in a lifetime.
It would be a low estimate, a very low estimate for me to say 20 billion. Growing up rich is the dream. Your parents buy you anything you want, you go to the best schools, you only hang out with other rich kids, you get to party with all the right people. As a rich kid, you never experience any hardship. Life is as good as it gets. Or is it?
I've always hated how just because someone is born into a family of wealth, people automatically label them as a spoiled brat. Yes, my dad has a private jet, and I love flying in it. Yes, my dad has a mansion and cars, and I love making videos with them. Who wouldn't? But I have never pretended that those things were something that I earned.
Just to give people context, okay, so I was born in one of the poorest countries in the world, and then I grew up in one of the poorest communities in the United States. Yeah. I'm fully aware of the criticism, and I've also seen the other side of things, which is like as an adult, most of the people I deal with tend to be, very wealthy individuals or very wealthy families. And so I've seen both sides of the extremes. And after seeing everything, I would say that I have never seen a single person from a poor community even remotely as mentally ill as kids from rich families. Like you can't even compare the two. However much you feel like your parents might be disappointed in you, you multiply that by 1 billion, and now you understand what it's like to grow up as a rich kid. So again, I'm saying this as someone who's been to the extremes of both ends. You just can't compare the two. Like I would absolutely, if I had to start life over again, I would absolutely choose to start again in a super poor community.
All right, let's pause it right there,
for the rest of my life, than to have to.
Yeah, that's your business mentor, you were saying?
Yeah.
How'd you find that guy?
He watched my channel.
Oh, shit. Wow. Is that the guy we were talking about yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, that's him. Are we allowed to say what his background was?
Yeah, he was the former president of Jordan Belfort's company. His modern day companies, not Stratton No Mark.
Oh, that's awesome. But he's making an amazing point because we've all seen these kids. I saw them at different levels of my life. I remember in college where you could tell that there was a kid who went to boarding school and whose mom started drinking at 2 o'clock in the afternoon just to pass the time to pretend her life was good in her fucking mansion, and she's actually miserable, and then it dragged on to him because he had all these expectations, and daddy's out working all the time doing this thing, probably fucking a bunch of other women too, and it just it has a cascading effect on them. And I felt bad for those kids because you could tell that it's almost like they didn't have that light in their eyes that a lot of other kids have going to college. It was more just like, oh, this is what's expected of me. And I can imagine, behind closed doors, a lot of them were miserable.
Yeah. And, most of them end up, taking one of these respectable jobs like consulting or finance or whatever. Because, yeah. And when you go to like one of these super rich boarding schools, you end up just comparing yourself to everyone else. Oh, that family gave this kid a Ferrari, and I only have a Mustang or something like that. So
that's crazy.
It really warps your perspective.
Yeah. I never understood that, and I think that's actually a problem with modern day society too. They call it like the Instagram effect on everything, but people got to show you what they have or what their drip is and why it's almost like I'm better than you, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. I've never gotten caught up in that because I'm just like, why? What the fuck is so wrong with just enjoying life and being a normal person? Why do I got to wear Gucci this or Versace that? Like a lot of people, I'm not saying nice things aren't nice, but a lot of people are literally buying any nice things they have strictly because of what other people are going to think about it or what they think they're going to think about it.
Yeah, and when it comes to those really loud luxury brands, like, the actual rich people don't wear those brands. It's only the aspirational people that, want to come off rich that they'll wear like a giant Gucci logo or something like that. Like the billionaires definitely aren't wearing that stuff.
Remember like the Kanye quote? He's like, billionaires don't wear chains. and then when he lost his book, Dave Chappelle's like, put your chain on. It is true though. Like you see these guys, the guys who are really wealthy and are, I don't want to say like humble in that wealth, but just they don't have anything to prove. They're the ones that roll up like, their fucking shirts sticking out. What the fuck do they care? And the people that want to show you are like those new rich people. They're like, oh, I got to have the Ferrari. I got to do this. It's very weird what that does to our psychology.
Yeah, definitely.
And to you, it made you get blue hair.
Yeah, blue hair is funny. I dyed my hair in high school, but I was like broke back then, so I couldn't afford to keep it up.
Oh, so this is an OG broke thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What were you dyeing it in high school?
It was like platinum blonde.
Platinum blonde.
Yeah.
I like the blue's a good look.
Thanks. Yeah, I've done a lot of colors at this point. I seem to settled on blue.
Does it damage your hair doing it that much though?
I have really thick Asian hair.
That's good.
So if you have like really thin hair, it can really damage it.
Yeah.
But thick Asian hair seems to work.
How long does that take to do it? Like 20 minutes?
Oh, it's way longer, dude.
Way longer.
I waste so much time and money on this.
Oh, you're doing it like the salon or something.
No, I have a hairstylist person that comes to my place.
Oh,
yeah.
Bougie. You got a little private person coming in. Wait, and you're living out in...
Yeah.
What's
and
what's going on?
Well, this is where my parents are. I grew up the second half of my childhood over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't just in... You were over there too. Were they?
I'd rather not say.
Oh, actually, that's fine. But I've never been out there. I heard it was a good time. I heard it was fucking insane.
It's all right. It's not my favorite because I grew up there. But yeah,
it's like fuck that. Well, thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.